Cool. So today we have had a lot of different talks, right? So we want to switch it up a bit, just change the format a little bit. So we'll be having a fireside chat with two of our senior Intuit leaders. So we have Anshu Verma. Anshu is the Vice President of Technology at Intuit India. He's been with Intuit since 2007 and he has spearheaded the growth of small business customers from 90K to 10 million. And currently he's working on two of the seven critical big bets at Intuit. And second, we also have Kalyan Kolachala. Kalyan is the Director of Developer Experience Group at Intuit India. And he also wears an additional hat of being the executive sponsor for the open source tech community. So this Hacktoberfest session couldn't have been here without his support. So thanks, Kalyan. And for the next couple of minutes, Kalyan will also be wearing an additional hat of moderating the fireside chat with Anshu. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kalyan and Anshu. Oh, yes.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thanks for braving the rain and water and be here.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Anshu. Thanks. Last year we had a fireside chat with Pratik, who heads the development platform. So this year we decided that let's talk to the largest consumer of the platform that we build and get that consumer perspective, and then they also contribute back a lot. So before I start the chat with Anshu, I thought I'll just give a brief because most of the attendees are from outside of Intuit. Just a little bit on Intuit open source culture and the platform approach. So basically, we have essentially a development platform, and Intuit operates at a huge scale, right? So we at peak we do over 10 billion transactions a day. If you look at our observability data, we do 1.5 petabytes a day. Billions of metrics per every few seconds and so on, right? So it's a huge scale, and we have decided one is on the platform approach where we have platforms that handle the complexity, the scale, and robustness, support for multi-zone, multi-region, all of that. Build some abstraction so that you are insulated from the underlying implementation, underlying technologies, and all of that. And then we work very closely with the business unit, so who provide all of this load and scale. Intuit being the leader in the space, there's a huge scale, and there's a huge diversity and heterogeneity and in all the different businesses that Intuit operates in. So that's been the approach. And what we've also seen is that looking at proprietary solutions, quite often they may work with mid-level enterprises, but for the scale that Intuit operates in, they typically don't work. And getting a vendor to make changes for that are customized to you doesn't work, right? And then it becomes very expensive. So what we've seen is uh, open source works much better, and the approach has been again, as I think one of the speakers or Barun talked about, the different levels, right? We first start by consuming open source, and quite often when we consume open source, it works, it meets 90% of our needs or 95%. But for example, at our scale, it may not, so it may have 30K TPS, we need 150K or 300K TPS. How do we get to that? We need multi-zone, multi-region, right? We need a lot more robustness and so on. So quite often, those are the layers that we add to it. We need multi-tenancy, we need additional integration. So we build those, and then Intuit has been very generous in contributing back. And quite often we see that there are gaps in the open source landscape. And in those cases, we've also added the open source, or essentially created something. So the first is consume, the other is to contribute back, and the third is create, right? And there are great examples, Argo, the whole Argo family, Argo CD, Argo workflow, eventing, and all of that, events and rollouts, that was donated by Intuit to CNCF. We also have exciting projects like Numa Proj, which includes Numa Flow for essentially the streaming and processing and all of that. There's Numa Logic with the ML pipeline and all of that, and ML model hosting, etc. And then there's Numa Plane. So all of those are again, they're seeing very good adoption. And yeah, I think we've talked earlier, so I'll not repeat all of that. But in observability, for example, we are building a data platform that's based on the lakehouse approach, which uses Trino for querying, Iceberg as a table store, and there's a catalog. We use Unity or Polaris and so on. So we use open source, but we also contribute back, and so that's worked very well for us. Sorry for a little long introduction. Uh, so Anshu, I mean, you've been consuming at scale on the development platforms and identity and others. So uh, if you can talk about your experience with some of these platforms and how they helped you, and yeah.
Awesome. So first of all, I'll just give you a little bit context on the business that I sort of, am accountable for. Just put the scale in perspective. So we were at about 4 billion in FY20. We became 8 billion in FY23. We are about 10 billion right now. We want to be 17 billion in another 2.5 years. So that's the kind of growth. With this, what is the growth? We have of course 10 million customers, but those 10 million customers are equivalent to about 47 million users because we are a multi-user systems. Now, what that really means from a scale and a complexity perspective is that we have about 700 terabytes plus of data growing at about 3 to 5 terabytes every week. And that particular rate is actually increasing. Our systems are serving about 2 billion plus APIs every day with an availability of 3 nines. Now we have to move to 4 nines. We are sort of, delivering domain events like because we are a distributed system. It's about 900 million right now. And with the work that we are doing by end of this particular year, it will be 2 billion plus. And we have 2000 plus, fleets of services, etc. We move about $1 trillion of money every day. We have about $82 billion, sorry, $3 trillion of invoicing and bills that pass through our system. If you look at it, one third of US's GDP is probably going through our systems. So if you put that in perspective, we have people who are accountable for that, who sort of delivering software which meets these customers' need to be able to run the business, where the platform teams really come up with like, how do you make all of this up and running? How do we provide all of these services and the capabilities which can make this happen? And that is what the development and the DevX teams over here really do. They provide us the entire infrastructure, the tools, the solutions. Of course, the foundation of many of these is open source. Open source is so critical, and that is where we benefit from. Like if you look at it, the way we deploy, we actually use the MSaaS, and I hope people have heard about. Like that's what we really call our infrastructure to deploy our services. So today, any engineer in our company in less than 5 minutes, they can create a new service and deploy it in production because we have MSaaS. You can do the same thing for a user experience. You can just go one click, you can create a user experience. You can do the same thing for a pipeline that you want to create. If you want to sort of, build an event consumer, if you want to build an event producer, you can just do those in less than 5 minutes today. And that's what this particular team is built. If you want to build an API, there is a portal you go, you say, this is what my API would look like, and it is actually published, and that particular graph is available for the entire world. That's what the particular team has really enabled. And like, if it was not for the all the foundational work that these teams are doing, we won't be able to serve our business. So each of these have direct correlation with the business, the way we observe our business, so that we know exactly what's happening to our customers. Like imagine when you have 2 billion plus APIs, these are just APIs called. We have about, like, I think, more than 50 billion user interactions that we actually get every day. How do you track each and every interaction so that you understand what is really happening to our customers, which we actually call as an FCI? And right now, the team is also helping us. Like we are moving to another space, which is called mid-market. Now, where today what happens is in a world-class SaaS, 0.025 of FCI is world-class. But in the world of the enterprise who's actually paying you about $50,000 every year, they don't expect, like, even one FCA is not possible. And Ashwin is here, he's actually helping the team, that which means that we have to like understand each FCI, which means that you can't do, first of all, sampling anymore, which also means that like, how do you create that particular infrastructure that can scale to these customers? And the lastly, how do you ensure that there is zero FCAs are delivered to our customers? So it's a huge shift that Intuit is making. And thanks to all the work that the team really does, we are grateful. Like if we didn't have all of this particular work, we would not be focusing on the customers. And by the way, this particular team is very customer obsessed. They understand the customer problem, and then they build the particular solution that different business units and different domain teams can actually leverage. So, kudos to this particular team, and thank you so much, Kalyan, for everything that the team does.
Yeah. So So one of the goals we have is that with the platform, the goal is that it should be easier for the BUs to focus on the customer problem, and leave the underlying details. But quite often there are new requirements that come up, and BUs, and you need to deliver rapidly to customers, and sometimes the dev platforms are not able to cater to all the needs. And so we've been looking at inner source models, and we've had a lot of contributions that are coming from the BUs. And the approach that we've taken is that instead of BUs forking something, let them contribute it back to the platform, and then eventually it goes to the open source. So maybe, and there are great examples, right? We have the dev portal and app fabric, and that app fabric is a great platform that came from Anshu. It was led by Anshu and his team, and that's been great. So can you talk of some such examples, and how do you think inner source works, and
Yeah.
with some
So I
examples?
think like at Intuit, this is one of the good things that, and of course, I will not say that we are perfect, by the way, just in full honesty. This, like every company, this is a journey in a particular company. But I think we are making that particular journey as well, wherein we really believe in inner source as well as open source. Argo is an example, this stuff that we have done with Kubernetes is an example. NumaFlow is another example. There's another example of the Fugo player, which, we used and then we found that, okay, this is very useful. Now we have actually open source. So we follow that particular similar model over here. See, in the end, the principle that we have is that you have come here to solve a particular problem. You don't want to repeat the same thing which has been done. And one learning is that building a small prototype is very easy, but scaling it to billions of transactions and to millions of customers is the hardest part. And that is where what we are doing is we are leaning on open source and inner source. And it does not really matter which team is really building, but we extend the platform that we have. So even currently what we are doing is we are partnering with the team, and if we need to contribute, we will actually contribute. We have not done just that internally, even externally. For example, like we found some issues in Kamunda. We have actually gone and made contribution to Kamunda. The Aurora Postgres journey, we have taken like our legacy systems and moved to Aurora Postgres. We've actually made Aurora Postgres and AWS better. So we are doing all of those things. And even right now, as we actually speak, when we are thinking about the distributed systems, we are finding certain gaps. So we are partnering with the teams and we are building those solutions, which are sort of, part of the entire city map. We have done data migration, data quality related tools, etc. So that's common, and it's getting more and more. We are getting better at it. So I would say that if I were to rate myself, maybe like 2 years ago, we were probably a 2 or 3. I think with the help and the education of the DevX team that we have at Intuit, we've probably gone to about like 7-ish, but we still a little bit more to go, wherein we can get better. But I would say that it has been really an unblock, because in the end you can't solve every problem, and when you find gaps, go and lean on that problem. The other interesting thing that we have also done is that in case you're typically sometimes it happens either there are some execution challenges that you lean into. So what we have done is we have created this platform friction process. So let's say you want to use a particular platform, that particular platform is not really ready. You can create a platform friction and you can put in a request that I want to build something new, which is different from this. And in 24 hours, approved by our CTO, he'll actually review it. And then he'll say whether you can go ahead or not. The promise is that you have to make it better than the other solution that is there. So as long as you promise that you can even go and build something which will eventually replace it. So, like we have sort of, enabling those as well within the company so that we can create more innovation through inner source models as well. Hopefully, that helps.
Yeah, thanks. And it's been a great collaboration with your team, and I think the platforms have benefited a lot. Uh, and again, Anshu, you've been leading some of extremely complex and very strategic initiatives within Intuit. The whole QuickBooks modernization project, where we've from monolith we have moved to microservices. We've used a more of an eventing and a sync approach with a lot of patterns and everything coming in, and there's again the mid market IES initiative as well, which you've been leading. So if you can talk about that and some of the challenges, and uh, where open source helped, and it's not just open source about software, but even in terms of patterns, what have we what have we consumed, what have we innovated, and are we contributing back, not just as a software, but ideas and patterns and best practices and so on.
Yeah. No, that's a great one. Let me start with the modernization. So just so that you all know, uh, as I mentioned, that we have a $10 billion+ business. That particular business was running on a legacy system. And so much so that like if you start off your best Mac machine today, there's nothing else that you can run on that particular Mac machine. So if you have to build that, and your Mac machine used to make a sound like, "Oh," you can literally hear that, like even today. And of course, you can't build a multi-billion-dollar business on top of that. But it is complex. Was built in 21 years. That's what, it really worked. So when we start to think about the modernization, we were not thinking about this as a decomposition or a refactoring. That you take what you have and you put it like, it's not like you take a bigger cake and you cut small slices, because then you will basically get what you built 21 years ago. And so what we really did is we said that, okay, the future is going to be very, very different. Our customer expectations are very, very different. So why don't we really think about a completely different way and build it from ground up? And that's the humongous task that we have taken, and it's enormous. It's enormous in terms of some of the scales that I mentioned, but there are about 36 of these capabilities, which is equivalent to probably 100 of these services, which we are writing from ground up. Today, 60% of our overall traffic is there in the modern system, and 40% is still on the legacy system, but our customers don't know. So to do that, we had to build a lot of patterns. And what we said is that it is not about how do you modernize a particular capability, because what you write inside, that's not where the complexity is. The complexity is between the space between the two boxes, because how you communicate with each other, how you make sure that there is data consistency in a distributed system, how do you even understand that the customer really knows that? So for that, we have actually built multiple patterns, which there's one which we actually call as a data. You all know about the sagas, but there's only theory for saga. You go to microservices.io, you will actually see theory. You will go to eventuate.io, you will actually see like some libraries which sort of, work or don't work. So we first of all defined that particular pattern, and we have built a solution for that. And that particular solution can ensure data consistency across in a distributed system, and also surface to that particular user, which means that if you've created an invoice and in the end the reporting system has not really meant that, you can actually show that and you can track that. And that has been like, great collaboration with the team. So that's one pattern. And the bigger thing that we have learned is that drawing these target state architecture diagrams are easy. Engineering is in the path to get there. And as a path to get there, when you have these two systems, how do you ensure that these two systems work together very well? So we have come up with a concept of duality, wherein in the intermediate state, the two systems have to be in sync, and we have defined like 5 stages, such that like you can start from from a proxy stage to a stage wherein you are this system of record, till the stage that the downstream also understand, which means that there will be a time when the data downstream has to understand two sets of data. So how do you do this? Is a very, very complex problem. So we have created not just a pattern, we have also built an SDK. We actually plan to open source that this particular year. That's what the team really wants to do, because I think every modernization project really needs this. Like, how do you do sync between, there's a two-way sync going on. There are APIs which are actually different. How do you create that particular API? How do you do traffic migration? That's a bunch of issues. So we sort of built all of these as patterns, and we have not thought about them as one of, and we sort of created a program which we called as App Foundations and Core App at Intuit. And then we have sort of added these various capabilities all across. So now this capability is ready. This capability will again be part of the DevX toolkit that we have and be available over there. So those are some examples. So we always think about things in terms of patterns, because individual use cases are great. You can take those use cases, but then you're solving for a use case. So we take those use cases, extract a particular pattern, and then build as patterns so that we can move faster. Initially, it might seem a little slower, but it gives you velocity over a period of time. The other shift that we are making is that we have learned that you have to be opinionated about certain things. Because if you're not opinionated and if it is like free for all, then what you really get is those seams are visible everywhere. So we have been opinionated. That's why at Intuit we have like, okay, if you have to deploy a service, if you have to build a service, MSAS is the way. If you have to build a user experience, UX Fabric is the way. If you have to do observability, this is exactly how you should actually do it, because that particular consistency gives velocity. At the same time, the consistency is for the customer as well. So we have kept like some of these patterns that we are building. And now with mid-market, we are again partnering with the teams, because now we have to think about scale, and a scale in the way we have not done before, which means that every system would need to be thought of very, very differently. Like, how do you deploy the system? How do you manage the data? because these are the companies which will, like, they'll make one call and they will create a noisy neighbor for everybody. So while we have done noisy neighbor in terms of tax being deployed separately from the small business, now within small business there are these different customer archetypes that are there. So, and thankfully, like, in a very short duration, the team actually helped us to sort of release it in production, wherein some of the particular traffic is there in a different pod, but the data store is the same. So now how do you think about the data store? And when you're making a query, it is going across different shards. So how do you bring the data together in a sharded world? Like, enormous amount of problems which we are really looking at it solving in a pattern way and partnering with the team. We have a coding challenge going on. That's another thing that we do at Intuit. We sort of create these coding challenges, wherein instead of doing analysis paralysis, we get the teams together and say that let's go and build and see what really comes of, because otherwise you can keep solving things on a piece of paper, but that's not where you solve the problem. You solve the problem in the code. And not that we don't do design, by the way. Sometimes people misunderstand when I say that. We do deep design. It's just that we don't write like lots and lots of documents which are just describing things and analysis paralysis. Go build, do the design, make it rock solid, and then prove it with the code. So that's the approach that we have. Like, think about patterns and keep building those patterns. And we've internally sort of made a list of it. Now we want to also take it externally and get feedback from people.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's really impressive, and we've been working with you and seen. And in fact, uh, to add to that, I think when we look at the whole development platform, I think we have been looking to evolve and go higher up the stack. And so, in addition to providing, the scalability and resilience and robustness, I think one evolution is the abstraction that we are trying to build, so that the platform is a lot simpler and it hides details. But the other, even more important abstraction is what I think Anshu you mentioned is around patterns, right? Where you actually have a common set of patterns, patterns for common set of use cases and problems, so that for a related set of problems, you can have a pattern, and that's something that comes from the platform. And I think one thing we can work together is the patterns that your team has come up with, incorporate that in there. And even for example, right, today we have an event bus that's based on Kafka, and then there is OMS based on Pulsar, and uh, they are very robust. But again, we have essentially exposed the guts of the systems to the developers. uh, Many developers use it right, but many do a lot of wrong things. There's a lot of anti patterns in place, and if we can have these patterns, they can be somewhat opinionated in some cases, but you actually have safeguards and guardrails in place, and dev velocity really goes up because you're operating at a higher level of abstraction using patterns, right? So I think if we work together and add that to the platform, I think the entire organization and maybe the overall community outside as well will benefit.
Exactly. And like, the one such example was like recently, when we were thinking about, when you have to publish a domain event, it sounds so simple. Like, you have to publish a domain event, but when you have to think about it, guaranteed publishing,
Mhm.
it becomes such a complex problem. And that's where the teams are, now you have to bridge everything. And today at Intuit, you can do that with just one single line. And that's all that you have to really do. And then the glue between, like, you write in your table, when the data actually gets committed, like through Golden Gate or through Debezium, it automatically moves, the event is actually published, all that work is done. And similarly, now we are also working on guaranteed consumption. Again, simple problem, but how do you ensure so many of these things? So we just want to make it simpler and simpler and be opinionated and create these patterns into the glue. So it's just working fine. I know we are running out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one last question before we go for Q&A. I mean, since there's a lot of talk on Gen AI and how helpful it has been, if you can talk briefly about how it has been, Gen AI and CodeGen has been helping with developer productivity, dev velocity, and even some other Gen AI tools for automation and so on.
Of course, we Gen AI is a transformational technology, and I'm sure like each of us know that. Our CEO Sasan really says that it is the moment like electricity. When electricity came in and internet came in, it actually changed the world. The same is actually happening with Gen AI, and I think about like anybody who uses a touch screen or a device or a keyboard, their lives are going to change. Either you are a producer or either you are a consumer, and that's the shift that Gen AI is bringing. I think like from a development perspective, it's a really a tool that we should use to be able to improve our productivity. Of course, we are evaluating and looking at things like Codium, but there are so many co-pilots are actually available. And as engineers, anything which is not really core to you, which is about thinking about the customer problem, I think Gen AI can actually do that, and it can give you really ideas. So we are encouraging our teams to be able to do that a lot. And even the way we are thinking about automation. So one thing that we are working on right now is that, can you not write automation? Can automation just be generated through generative AI? And not just your test of unit tests. We are also thinking about FMEA. So if you can understand your system, can it actually generate the FMEA test, behind that? So we are really thinking about leveraging generative AI in all the places, all the way, including like even when we are communicating, all our meetings have an AI summary enabled, which means that you are now not taking notes, which I was horrible at. So I'm like so thankful, and I always used to take recording and then go to the recording, or take my EA's help, who used to sort of look at like, okay, do the transcription, but now the AI summary is this. I think AI is there everywhere, and we have started to use that and leverage it. I would say that's still early in the journey, but I think we have to be very comfortable, with the AI tools that are there. There's so many open source tools that are there. I have started to use a lot. During my walk, I actually talk to the GPT, and then it sort of gives me the areas that I should really focus on. So, and I see that our developers are also doing that. But something for us to look at and keep building and keep innovating this particular tool so that we can focus on the customer problem. And we say that it's not that generative AI will replace our engineers. Engineers who don't know generative AI, or AI will be replaced by people, who know it. So please make sure that you make yourself equipped, and it just becomes like just one another toolkit that you have in your box to make you more productive and more efficient.
Yeah, and also just to add, I think beyond just the code gen and unit testing and end-to-end testing, I mean, we're seeing a lot of users. For example, in observability, we are doing AI ops.
Yeah.
It works very well with Gen AI. In fact, run books are an example where
Yeah.
we need to troubleshoot, and run books are incomplete or out of date. You can auto-generate run books. That's one of the things we are working on. And there's some very there's a migration we are doing where we need to migrate something like 120K queries, right? It's humanly not possible, right? So you need some Gen AI with LangChain kind of tools, and that's something that we've had very good success with. So
Very true.
the possibilities are immense, and the benefits are huge, right? So I think
Yeah.
we probably will take some questions.
Any questions? Who's the brave one?
I think
I think that one of the interesting aspect that you suggested is building the patterns out, solving the more not only an Intuit problem, it's an industry problem. That, for example, Saga that you took an example. Uh, so there are many such frameworks available which can help you in building those kind of patterns. So is it something Intuit is looking into, create a framework around it which they want to open source, or what is the idea? Means it the idea that you're thinking of on that side?
Yeah. So the first of all, the idea and the way we work at Intuit is solve a customer problem.
Yeah.
Number one. Okay. Number two is we basically are looking at solving it through patterns. And once we have built those patterns, it's an evolution for us to take a decision whether we want to open source it or not. Many of these, which are not really like core and do not really sort of have business impacted with it, we are thinking about open sourcing it. So that's how we really operate. And we do have like programs in place, like the one that we're talking about, making everybody aware. Sometimes you have to do this very deliberately and intentionally. Otherwise, you are in this particular cycle of building and solving, but at the same time, it's also our way to give back to the community, because we leverage a lot. We leverage a lot of open source, and like just like any company, right? Like, but we do a lot. We only do proprietary only if it is really needed, and then we do the glues, which are really needed for us. So we do believe in this as a philosophy that we have to give back to the community. So that's why we do this intentionally as well.
So one more point that you took is, say, optimization of some certain CSP services like Aurora Postgres that you took an example. So is it something which Intuit is directly involved into those optimizations, or is it more of an collaborative way with the AWS to helping in giving the feedback for optimizations?
It is both.
Okay.
So, it's a close partnership, just
Mhm.
the way we do partnership internally. That's how we also partner with like our CSPs. So based on the problem space, we either give a problem or we sort of co-create solutions. In many cases, we have co-created solutions as well.
Okay. Okay.
So in fact, one reason we've used open source is I'll not take names, but there have been vendors who not scaling up and there are a lot of limitations. So quite often when we need to take them further, we have to end up co-creating. And in fact, we give all the ideas which the vendor has to incorporate and it takes time. And then we realize why not use open source
Yeah.
and build it ourselves? It's much faster. And
Yep. Absolutely.
One more question, and
Yeah.
I know.
I have a question. So I heard that you are moving to the mid market, right? So as you go through that journey, you may be re-architecting the business model to all the technology systems. So similarly, a lot of businesses in India, a lot of startups may also want to take that maybe in different domains. Just like you open source your
Hmm.
code and others, do you plan to share your learnings in your journey to mid market so that other startups can benefit from that?
Yeah, we do plan to do that. Like some of this is like, the transformation we are making is also, public. How we are making that particular transformation is something that we do want to share, but we are in the midst of that. So we do believe in doing it and then talking about it, like not before that. So, that's an Intuit principle. So we are in that particular journey. We are very confident of it, that we will crack that. We know what needs to be done. It's a matter of doing it. And once we do it, we'll certainly be sharing it with everybody as well.
yeah, just one
So,
thing I'll add. In fact, the fact that these patterns are reusable, right? I think the proof is coming like all the microservices and micro front ends we have built, which are very composable, which was done for as part of the QB modernization. But because I've been working with the IES team, a lot of those uh, architectural patterns we've used, I mean, have been useful in IES, right? So we've been able to compose together different applications which are more targeted to mid market. A lot of the patterns that were created or that came up as part of QB modernization are now being reused for IES, which validates the idea that these are reusable and have a broader scope.
I know I can go on and on. I have that habit. So, yeah. Feel free to, like send me a note, email at any point of time. You have the contacts of the people. Happy to, chat further. But thank you for the
Yeah,
opportunity
thanks.
for
Again,
inviting me.
Anshu was very busy, but thanks again for making time and sharing insights and from his
Yeah,
experience.
harder part was coming in my two-wheeler from home over here. I don't drive a car, so I'm like my trousers are wet, but it was worth it. Thank you so much for inviting me. Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you, team.
Awesome. Um, cool. So now we're also done with the fireside chat. I know we have a lot of external folks here, so we'll just have a couple of minutes for our talent community partners to just share on some updates. So I'll hand it over to Kirti. Yeah.
Hi everyone, thank you for making it today and braving the rain to be here. My name is Kirti. I'm part of the talent acquisition team here at Intuit. On the screen, you see we are basically hiring for, it's all right, people can still see me. We're hiring for multiple roles, multiple open roles, but what you see on the screen are just two that we've hyperlinked. We also, towards the end of this presentation, there'll also be a QR code that you can scan for our careers pages to kind of browse through open roles as well. I've just put broad buckets. So software engineer to senior software engineers, ideally in the 2 to 9 years bucket. It doesn't necessarily hold good. We're always open to having exploratory chat and having an exploratory chat and seeing what works for you. And then staff software engineer and above, ideally 10 plus years of experience. Again, like I said, we can have an exploratory chat and figure it out. But yeah, if any of these skills meet your immediate requirements, you can go ahead, scan the QR code and apply. But otherwise, you can always go through our careers page that's linked at the end of the presentation um, and browse through open jobs that we have at Intuit.
Awesome. Cool. You can also chat with her during the lunch for the networking session. And before we break for lunch, I think this is the final slide. So we have gone through a couple of different talks. We have gone through CNCF, security, observability, and AI/ML, etc. So for us, it has been a a great journey starting Intuit Hacktoberfest in 2019 internally, and then of course COVID happened. Then we started out externally in last year. It's great to see that it's not a off layer or one-time event. It's coming as a recurring event. So we'd like to keep that happening, and there have been a lot of folks working on this. We have seen the external speakers, external audience. We have our exec sponsors and leadership who have been supporting us. There are also folks who have been working in the background, like logistics team and security team and comms team and so on. So I'd like to just have a moment of thanks for everyone who is involved in this program to make it a success. And we'd also like your feedback to ensure this remains a success and we can scale for more number of events or interesting topics so on for the next time. So if you could probably scan this QR code and provide your feedback, that would be really helpful for us to plan for the next sessions. And of course, like Kriti mentioned, we also have a QR code for the career opportunities. All right, so that's pretty much it from us, folks. Feel free to connect during the lunch. Yeah.